The 36-year-old female is expected to be okay after she was taken to Bellevue Hospital. According to authorities, she was coming out of a gift shop, and the assailant seemed very calm before attacking her right here in front of this deli.
So Times Square is one of the most visited places in the entire world, which makes you think more would be done to protect the estimated 50 million people who pass through here every single year. But in fact, the opposite is happening. Times Square is getting worse, and some people say that's being allowed to happen on purpose.
Safety concerns resurfacing in Times Square after separate attacks sent 2 victims to the hospital.
The attacks happened just steps away from where 2 NYPD officers were pummeled by a group of migrants.
That is actually, quite shocking to hear that happened.
This knife and this broom handle, police say, were involved in an attack on a 17-year-old in the Times Square area. This is that attack, seen from surveillance video.
The victim is expected to recover after she was taken to Bellevue Hospital, as New Yorkers try to imagine what triggered the seemingly unprovoked attack.
Police say both of these violent crimes were committed by large groups of people, many of them teenagers. Overnight, detectives questioned 10 suspects they have in custody.
I feel terrible for him because he's obviously a troubled person. I feel terrible for her.
Well, that's a part of New York I had not seen.
The NYPD tells Pix 11 News he's been arrested at least 14 times.
That's scary.
The alarm bells have been going off for months, screaming that Times Square is changing and not for the better. But even though our leaders insist that these are all isolated incidents, what nobody's talking about is that they're all part of a massive crime wave sweeping through our streets. Like the gangs on mopeds that ride around stealing handbags and iPhones, the out-of-control protests which show up seemingly once a week, and the open-air markets full of stolen items on our street corners, revealing that a trend of lawless behavior is taking off and it's not slowing down. Plus, when officers try to stop a criminal, things can turn violent, which happened just a few days ago where 2 officers ended up getting injured while trying to confiscate a gang member's moped. Yet the concentration of crime is more apparent here in Times Square than anywhere else in the city, which could spell disaster as the 330,000 people who pass through here every day are now at risk. Yet many of them are part of our $72 billion tourist industry, the only industry still supporting the area where Times Square is located, which ever since 2020 has been full of empty offices and is essentially on life support economically. On top of that, the city's running out of money as it continues to deal with the influx of asylum seekers from all around the world, which has seen several bankrupt neighborhood hotels here turned into shelters, which critics say could have something to do with the overall crime wave taking place in the city, while police and the mayor contest that by saying the vast majority of asylum seekers are here for a better life, not a life of crime. And although statistics support this, the real reason crime here is out of control is much more frightening, because the more you look at what's going on in America's most visited tourist attraction, the more it looks like our leaders have completely lost control of the city. Because since we don't enforce our laws, criminals of all backgrounds feel emboldened, and the general public has no idea how bad this is getting. McDonald's, Times Square, highly visible, well-trafficked location, cameras everywhere. You'd figure that this would be a safe place, but unfortunately that's not the case.
People have been charged in a machete attack in Times Square. 23-year-old Philip Robertson, 25-year-old Aaron Hamilton, and 46-year-old Robert Price face reckless endangerment and obstruction charges. Robertson is also charged with criminal possession of a weapon.
Can you believe that? Something happening right on a street corner like this where everybody's basically watching, so to speak? And this incident happened by a McDonald's. There are 3 in the area here. There's police at the one we're standing by now. And to be honest with you, all of this just screams chaos. It looks like a city that is out of control, or at least teetering on the edge. Also, this attack took place at 1 p.m., not 1 a.m., just in case anybody's wondering. And according to the police report, it was not just some random act that took place here. It was over a turf war related to street vendors who sell things on blankets just on the sidewalk area, along with plenty of fake AirPods. Those are being sold here too. And not only is the idea of a turf war very frightening, look at the lawlessness that preceded it. You've got people selling whatever they want on the side of the road, no license. Yes, that's been going on here for years, but now people are so emboldened by the lack of any consequences for their actions that they're taking matters into their own hands. And you know, look, I get it, Times Square, it's always been a little wild, it's always been a little bit crazy, but the fact that we have people taking each other out because they don't like one illegal business being next to their illegal business, we've got a real issue. But as you're about to see, this isn't just an issue of gang members trying to take each other out. In fact, tourists are getting swept up in these same disturbing incidents, like the one one that took place at this deli over here.
The victim is expected to recover after she was taken to Bellevue Hospital, as New Yorkers try to imagine what triggered the seemingly unprovoked attack.
I feel terrible for him because he's obviously a troubled person. I feel terrible for her. So just for nothing, that's a part of New York.
All right, this incident much more frightening. It took place when someone was walking out of this gift shop and tried to walk past this deli. This is the camera that captured the entire unfortunate event. The assailant was literally just hanging out right out front. He just bought something at the deli and then got up and randomly attacked somebody, which is incredibly frightening because thousands of people walk by here every single day. You've got people going in and out of these little stores. Luckily, nothing happened inside the store. These places are tiny inside. There's not a lot of room to move around and escape. But this random incident also took place middle of the day, broad daylight, and you'd think to yourself that there's safety in numbers when real life is happening. It's not some sketchy hour of the day. It's not a back alley somewhere. It's the middle of New York. And what's crazy is this deli where this took place is right around the corner from where the police are parking their vehicles. You can see one over here. There's typically patrol cars parked right there. But as you're about to see, the reason this took place was entirely preventable because not only was the assailant somebody the police were aware of, he actually happens to live across the street.
Police say Destin has a history of at least 14 arrests.
People they perform crimes and they're in and out of jail the same day, and then they do it again, and people get angry because why are they free?
Now Destin is set to go forward.
So not only is this a person with 12 prior arrests that everybody in local law enforcement here is probably aware of, apparently they're also a resident of this facility right here, which is a shelter for the homeless, and which just so happens to be directly across the street from the location of the attack. And although the city spends a lot of money doing its best to help the homeless population, apparently some people are taking advantage of that generosity. And according to the New York Post, just 6 months ago, this attacker was involved in an incident inside the shelter. Apparently something took place inside the facility. They got upset and threw a chair through a glass window, shattering it. And apparently they also threatened workers at the shelter along with the police, who arrived to de-escalate the situation. Now the police did end up arresting this individual for criminal mischief, but since shattering a glass window isn't violence against a person, it's non-violent and non-bail eligible, so he was released. Now, when you've got somebody with a criminal history going back 20 years, who is now 62, acting the exact same way, the real reason we've got a crime problem here starts to emerge. Is mental health part of the problem here? Absolutely. Should more be done? Absolutely. But how can the fact that this person is released pretty much every time they do something wrong not also be part of the problem? What criminal is going to fear arrest or the presence of police if every time they end up in the back of a car, they're eventually let out with no consequences, no loss of freedom? And as you're about to see, it's not just those with a mental illness who are taking advantage of New York City's soft on crime laws, turning Times Square into a place nobody should ever visit. So here we are at the Candler Building, one of the city's shelters for asylum seekers. Single men, holds about 800 people, and what took place right over here just a few months ago shocked the entire country.
This video shows a group of men assaulting officers in Times Square. Officers tried to break up a disorderly group on West 42nd Street. When police tried to take the person dressed in yellow into custody, that's when things took a turn and the group began attacking.
So what you had right over here was an unprovoked attack on police officers who were just doing their job. And although it's been revealed that the folks involved in the attack were asylum seekers, reports do not indicate any of them were residents at this specific facility. Rather, these individuals were part of a crime ring that were in this area for a very specific purpose. Either way, the event that took place right over here was one that shocked everybody, because here we've got folks who look like they were taking advantage of the generous safety net provided by the city that takes care of folks seeking asylum. And the folks involved in this unfortunate incident, just like the person involved in the incident at the deli, were all individuals with a long rap sheet who the police knew about and had prior arrests. And as you're about to see, the police involved in this were totally unprepared for what became a wild, out-of-control situation. So as you can see here, the police were outnumbered. There were only 2 of them, and that was a very, very large crowd. At the end of the day, about 6 people were involved in the actual assault on those police. This camera right up here captured the overhead view of the entire incident, and you can see from the body cam footage that when the police brought the man in the yellow jacket over to this building right here and pushed him up against the wall, that's when everything escalated. But what most people don't know is, even though the altercation may have started right here on camera, something else had happened in this Aldo store involving that group of people, and that's what the police were responding to. Apparently, in the moments before the attack, there was a shoplifting incident coupled with an assault at this Aldo store, which is right next to the area where the altercation altercation took place. Apparently, the people who assaulted the police were operating as a local shoplifting gang. And this was also not the first time they had gone into this specific store, stolen things, and then run away. So not only were they known to the employees at these stores, they were known to police who had arrested them previously for other shoplifting incidents. But since New York would rather release its criminals to protect them rather than punish them, they kept getting released, being emboldened by our soft on-crime laws. Furthermore, this is a sanctuary city, and New York has a rule that stops the police from cooperating with immigration. Meaning if they arrest someone for committing a crime and ICE is also looking for that person, there will be no conversation at all with the federal government. But this is where things get truly shocking, because we now know that police, before going after the group that was hanging out right over here, they were inside the store reviewing security footage, so they knew what crime had just taken place, they knew exactly who they were looking for, and then they found those same individuals outside, and what happened next is truly unbelievable. Because these attackers were all released without bail except for one person, by the district attorney, who didn't think the police had arrested the right man, or the right men, and this is in spite of all the video evidence from multiple cameras, police body cams, and in-store security. And if you want to know why criminals feel emboldened, well, the prosecuting attorney, the district attorney, takes their side versus the police, not just in this incident, but in incidents like it all the time. And shockingly, the person who was caught by police and ended up going to jail, once they got out, they went on to commit even more crimes. So here we are out back behind the shelter where this event took place, and it's recently come out that the city is giving plea deals to those who are involved that some people think are too light for what actually transpired. On top of that, one of the folks involved who's getting a plea deal was originally held on $15,000 bail, but apparently an activist priest paid that bail, he was released, and then went on to commit further crimes while out on bail. And you know what those crimes were? More shoplifting. It's a business, stealing things, reselling them on the internet, reselling them to local stores. This is how people are making money off the books. And although this particular individual had had 5 prior arrests, they still ended up being out on their own somehow in this city, which makes absolutely no sense, but is what many people say another example of why New York City is trending in the wrong direction when it comes to crime, and why places like Times Square are just being absolutely destroyed. And in several of today's incidents, the city has been footing the bill for the room and board of these folks. Now, I'm not saying people don't deserve compassion or a second chance, but how come there's no loss of privilege? How come people are still allowed to reside in the shelter system in some way after they commit crimes that should wind them up in jail? And critics say that the reason the city offers no consequence or punishment to anyone for doing anything is why we've got this crime problem. And this is why single repeat offenders or small groups of individuals are having such an outsized impact on iconic parts of our city. And they're why empty storefronts, ghost towns are popping up all over the city where nobody wants to try and run a business because that business is at risk and is not protected by our laws whatsoever. And what's really sad is all of these incidents, these attacks, they're not just having a negative impact on the city, they're also having a negative impact on the people who are supposed to protect us, the police.
The NYPD has seen historically high attrition over the past 4 years, where more cops are leaving and fewer are coming in. 2,931 officers either quit or retired last year, with only 2,345 recruitments. The data also shows the NYPD is at its lowest headcount since 1990, when there were 32,000.
So predictably, laws that embolden and empower criminals endanger and depress the police, causing officers to feel like their work is meaningless as the city they're trying to keep safe spirals out of control. But even though it's incredibly disturbing that the city has the lowest number of police that it's had in 30 years, the real issue is that they're now responsible for protecting 1 million more people than there were here 30 years ago. And if you've got more people living here and the same number of police, that unfortunately means there are more potential victims for criminals to go after, and there is a higher number of criminals as a byproduct of population growth. And that means simple math is really the reason why certain areas of town are starting to turn into things we never thought we would ever see. And one has to wonder what developments are on the horizon that might change or reverse any of this. We hear talk of reforms to bail laws that decriminalize many minor offenses, yet no real action has happened on that front. All those laws are still there. And the police exam, which in 2016 had a waiting list and an exam fee, is now rarely full, even though anyone can sit for it for free. But the real issue is that the city's dealing with an affordability crisis where $100,000 means you're gonna feel like you don't earn that much. And you know what? Police don't make $100,000 $100,000 here. When they start, they get 58, which means the prospect of putting your life on the line every single day to live in relative discomfort financially isn't worth it to many people. And whereas in the past, the idea of making the city a better, safer place and being a hero was part of the job's perks, now police find themselves the targets of activists and criminals and a justice system that sides with the criminals over the police and doesn't even believe them when they've got body camera footage, their own testimony, and cameras from every single source showing how they were attacked. And observers predict that as long as these dangerous trends continue, this war on police, so to speak, we're going to continue to see the deterioration of iconic parts of town just like Times Square. We're already seeing it in Central Park where there's been a recent crime wave, and the disturbing reality here is that no part of the city is safe. And even in broad daylight, things can happen that all of us would rather not have to think about. Is that what's going on here? How would you fix New York City's crime problem and save Times Square? Let me know. I'll see you in the next video.